I remember saying that prayer one morning after I worked out at the gym, and I heard God's voice again. And God said, son, if I take away the pain, I take away the learning. And when that message got through, when I finally understood that there was no easy way out of this, like this was happening and I had to learn to accept that, it was a huge paradigm shift for me because I stopped feeling sorry for myself. And this was a process. It wasn't immediate. Like this took like a couple of weeks. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I stopped feeling like life was unfair or unjust, or because I was going through this, I was being a victim or something like that. I was victimized. And instead I started like trying to really lean into it. And that progressed into me starting to express gratitude for it. Like, and at first I was kind of faking it, just like saying like, thanks God that I'm going through something hard. But after a little bit, I really started feeling gratitude. I was like, man, this is really good for me. I need to learn from this. I need to develop.
What's up, everybody? I want to welcome you back to the Overcoming Trauma podcast. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Gina Alverson and the Stay Mentally Strong Foundation, which is a suicide and mental health awareness program and nonprofit organization. So if you have any interest in checking out more about her or her story or her organization, the link is going to be posted on this podcast. But I want to welcome today's guest, Adam Allred. Thank you for being here, brother.
Man, I'm glad to be here, man.
Yeah, it's good to have you here.
Long time in coming.
Exactly. I still remember the first time I met you, though, by the way. So I got home from living out of the country for a couple years. I was on my mission. I was losing my hair in high school. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember this.
Yeah. I was.
You're bringing it up.
Yeah, and I was losing and then like I lost it so bad over the couple years on my mission. And I was talking to Tyler Buck. I'm like, bro, I've lost like all my hair, dude. And he's like, I heard Adam Allred like had lost a little bit of hair, but like now he has a full head of hair. Like you should hit him up and ask what he did. So like I called you. I'm like, dude, what'd you do? And you're like, well, just like this finasteride or something. Yeah. And so I got on that, and it obviously worked a lot better for you than me.
I think I caught it in enough time, right?
Yeah, because mine was gone. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's like what started it all. And then obviously you moved into just the house, a couple of houses up from where I grew up. So saw you more often at church and just things
walking
around
on the street and stuff, passing each other. Yeah,
exactly. So. But your story is just raw, real, you know, and you're so good at articulating it and sharing it. And then, I mean, what I love about you and what I wanted to get you on here for is like, you've been through serious pain, you've been broken, you know what it's like to suffer and like lose yourself and lose your identity. But like you've been able to rebuild that all back. Now you're in alignment with your purpose and you're back and healed. You know what I mean? So that's the exact person that I want to get on here to honor them and their story as they share it. And then also like use your story to help other people. So thank you for being here.
Like I said, I'm grateful to be here, man. I love the work that you're doing, the stuff that I've seen you post up, and just how raw and authentic you've been about your journey is super, super inspiring and helpful. So I'm happy to be part of the process in any way that I can.
Thank you.
Support you, brother.
Thank you.
By the way, you look good with your head shaved, man.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it.
Don't look good with no hair. You look tough, dude.
I appreciate it. I actually need to start doing more podcasts with this.
Yeah. Dude, you look like you're ready to whoop somebody's ass.
Yeah, no, that's what I've tried to do. I'm like, if I'm gonna be bald, I gotta at least have the build. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
You got the part, man.
But last thing I'll tell you, and then we'll start. So like I've like, this camera's like so close up on you, you know, that I'm like, I'm going to wear a hat because like sometimes I don't like the angle of it hitting my head. And then I was like, all right, I'm not going to do it. Like I'm going to just go bald and I'm going to record an episode with my mom. And like we had a good discussion. And then that was the first episode that like blew up and got like thousands of views and everything.
That's your good luck.
And then I went back to wearing my hat and people were like, what are you doing? But today I'm repping your hat.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. But so I'll let you just take away your story and just dive right into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've gone through what a lot of people have gone through, right? Like we live in this world of entropy, which means that it's working against us. You know, like we step out our front doors every day as men, and you're gonna be taking damage. Like life is gonna start doing life. It's gonna start kicking your ass. You know, that's kind of the playing field, and you just got to own the fact that we have to work through adversity to level up. But a lot of times we don't learn that until we really go through hard things, and that was me with my first marriage. So I got into a marriage. I was 30 when I got married. So I wasn't young, thought I was making the best decision, couldn't wait to have a family. For me, I was getting older. I was 30. So in our community here, like if you're 30 and you haven't been married yet, that's like, you're something of a pariah.
Right, exactly.
You know, a menace to society, I think is the official quote.
Right, exactly.
Right? And I never really bought into that. But nonetheless, I was like, dude, I'm 30. My business and stuff has started to take off. I would love to have a family. And so I ended up getting married, and it was right out the gates bad. I dated her for almost 2 years. But as soon as we got married, the whole dynamic changed. And it just went from like not good to bad to worse. And within 3 months, we were talking about divorce. And I don't come from a family of divorce. I was never going to get a divorce. You know, my whole career is getting sales guys to go out and do the hardest work of their lives and don't quit. You never quit. You stick with it. And that was my framework in that marriage. And we went through just a really rough 8.5 years, her and I, in that marriage together. We were just horrible together. And I thought that I was doing everything right. You know, I had this whole victim mindset, like, woe is me, like I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing, and it's just isn't working. And then at the end of that marriage, she was the one that pushed for the divorce. I was like, just so programmed, you just don't quit, you keep working at it. You know, that's what God wants me to do. I got to stay in this thing, I got to make it happen. And at the end, she started pushing for the divorce really hard, and I finally like accepted that I couldn't stop it, you know, and that like this was happening. We had 3 kids, so like so much of what I was focusing on was trying to do what I thought was best for the kids. But I had to accept that that's what she wanted, and so we came to terms, we talked about it, and as soon as I got on board for the divorce, then she decided she didn't want a divorce anymore. That was probably the hardest day of my entire life. Out of 8.5 years of a really hard marriage, going through this divorce process, finally getting somewhere where I'm like, no, you know what? Not only can I not stop her, but she's right. We have been at this for a long time, and we haven't made any improvements. If anything, it's just gotten worse. I'll start off, dude. I'm going to share really the most powerful spiritual experience I've ever had in my entire life. I feel like I've had a lot of really powerful experiences with God, but this is probably the most powerful one.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I remember the day. It was a Friday morning, like Thursday night. We'd settled everything. We were amicable. This is how we separated. It was like the first time that I'd felt any sort of, like, as crazy as it is, any sort of hope that there could be a better tomorrow. I didn't think divorce was going to be peachy. I didn't think post-divorce life was some sort of like bliss. I thought it was at least some sort of rock, though, that you could swim to instead of just treading water in this open ocean, not making any progress anywhere. It's like, at least there's this rock we can swim to, and we don't have to be stuck out here just fighting the waves. And when she reversed it the next morning, she got up, she's like, I don't think we should get a divorce. And I was so mentally messed up. I've never felt anything like, I felt like I was losing my mind. Like, so I tried to go to the gym to work out, try and work it out. Couldn't get this out of my head, out of my heart, out of my soul. Because on one hand, I felt like, okay, there's something we can do now. Like there's something to work towards, and we don't have to stay stuck. And then on the other hand, I'm like, but I got to make this work. That's what God wants me to do. That's what my family wants me to do. That's what I got to do for the kids. And so I was really, really dark place. And I ended up like praying to God in the gym shower for like 2 hours. I just sat on the floor in the shower and was the darkest, most lowest point of my entire life. I was in there for a long time. And I remember just like kept asking God, what should I do? What should I do? Waiting for God to give me the answer. And I got an answer. I heard God's voice in my head, and it was, well, son, what do you want to do? And that doesn't sound like much, but as soon as I heard that, there was this immediate calm, instantaneous, miraculous. Like I was immediately at peace. Like in that moment when I heard that voice, and I was really confused by it. I was like, what? What do I want to do? Like I wasn't expecting to hear that, for one. And then to have this peace, this tranquility just settle in, like Jesus on the waters of Galilee, like calming the storm. That's what was happening in my soul. I sat there for a long time pondering on that. And the voice came again, said, son, what is it that you want to do? And I was probably in there for another half an hour, just in this place of peace, just thinking through everything without all the emotions that I had been wrestling with. And I was like, I guess all things considered, God, I guess I do want a divorce. That's what I want. There was this immediate impression that I got that God said, yeah, if you don't do it now, you'll be back here in 18 months. And that was it. That was the only communication that I had. I never was told to get a divorce or not get a divorce. It was just, son, what is it that you want to do here? But I felt like it was okay, any decision that I made. And I said, I don't want to keep doing this. This is just not working. And I never looked back. You know, I was like, okay, that's the answer. That's what I'm going to stick with. I'm going to go forward with this, even though now she's not wanting to do it anymore. I'm going to go through with the divorce. And there was kind of some miraculous intervention, but we ended fairly peacefully, all things considered. But that's not the end of the journey. Your life is in shambles. I mean, I was going through an identity crisis, a faith crisis, a financial crisis. My family, felt like my kids were being taken away from me. And so there was a long road, a long, really depressing road for week after week, month after month. I would go to bed every night wanting to die, like every night, just wishing that I didn't wake up in the morning. And I'd wake up in the morning and be like, I don't want to get out of bed today. Like, I'm just totally miserable. But I had 3 kids I had 50% custody with. I was living in my grandma's attic in a one bedroom office with my 3 kids. and we were living out of garbage bags. And
I don't feel as bad for living in my grandparents' basement now.
no, dude, you got to go somewhere to lick your wounds. Dude.
Right,
I was
exactly.
my parents were on a mission at the time, so
And it's hard to lick them when you're all alone.
Yeah,
You know, like it's good to have people around you.
you need to have a support structure. Yeah, that's one of the morals of the story that that got me through. It was a very, very strong, powerful support structure. But literally every day, all day long, I would fantasize about dying, and I would continue to have these prayers. I get to the gym. I get up, get my kids breakfast, get them to school, go to the gym, try and work through some of this stuff, and then go to work and take care of your responsibilities. I had my little 2-year-old that wasn't in school yet, so I'm taking her everywhere with me, taking her to the office, trying to give her like nap time in the closet, the little office closet. Like, it was just such a mess. And I remember, these just constantly praying to God, asking him to give me a break, like that moment of tranquility that I had in that shower, to get that again. Like, just give me 10 minutes. Give me 20 minutes where I don't feel like absolute shit. And I remember saying that prayer one morning after I worked out at the gym, and I heard God's voice again. And God said, son, if I take away, God always starts off with son. I don't know why, but it always is like every time I hear God speak to me, it's always like son. He said, son, if I take away the pain, I take away the learning. When that message got through, when I finally understood that there was no easy way out of this, like this was happening, and I had to learn to like accept that this was the process. It was a huge paradigm shift for me, because I stopped feeling sorry for myself. And this was a process. It wasn't immediate. Like, this took like a couple of weeks.
Right.
I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I stopped feeling like life was unfair or unjust, or because I was going through this, I was being a victim or something like that. I was victimized. And instead, I started like trying to really lean into it. One of my cousins, he's an interesting character. He's like one of the most interesting men on the planet. His name's Sam. But he just traveled all over the world, and he lived with Buddhist monks for a while. And they talked about pain being something that you observe, you don't indulge in. So if you're feeling pain, observe the pain. Like, okay, this is what pain feels like. And so he actually came back and put a huge glob of wasabi in his mouth when he got back to the States, because he hates wasabi. And just like tears pouring down his face. He's just like, observe the pain, observe the pain. But for some reason, that funny little story kind of stuck in my head. I was like, okay, I'm going to just start observing this. This is what pain feels like. This is what a human experience feels like.
That's hilarious.
This is what getting your ass kicked feels like,
right.
Like it. And it's okay. I'm not going to resist it anymore. I'm not going to wish it away. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to just accept it. Like, okay, I'm having this human experience, and there's good in this human experience. And that progressed into me starting to express gratitude for it. Like, and at first I was kind of faking it, just like saying like, thanks God that I'm going through something hard. But after a little bit, I really started feeling gratitude. I was like, man, this is really good for me. I need to learn from this. I need to develop. And I could feel myself growing, even though I couldn't really articulate how. There felt like there was something divine in this pain, that the pain was sacred. As soon as I genuinely started feeling grateful for it, it just went away. All that depression that I was feeling constantly, day in and day out, it just kind of evaporated. And I don't think it was because some sort of miraculous God finally said, you've suffered enough, son, now I'm taking this away from you. I think it was because God said, this is the process. Once you get to a point where you can find gratitude in your suffering, once you can see your suffering as being something good for your soul, then that's kind of the natural, you learn the lesson, and now you can move into the next phase. And it's not like it's not still messy. I mean, I have kids with a first wife. Sometimes our, ideas of what's best for them conflict. You still have sometimes like these feelings will come up from that, from being in that dark place. You still, have life happened to you. But it was the most important life lesson that I've ever received ever, was going through that. Now I can say honestly, looking back on that marriage and that divorce, that those are some of the greatest blessings God has ever given me in my entire life.
Absolutely. Well, and what I love too, like just from an outside perspective, it's like, it sounds like the depression and everything went away because like you finally came to terms with the journey. You know what I'm saying? It was just like, for so long, it's the victim mentality. Why me? This sucks. Like, God, just please take this from me. Give me peace, And then God didn't give you that peace, but he was just like, if I take the pain, like he let the pain sit. He's like, you're going to lose the chance to learn, which allowed you to fully buy in, to be like, okay, what am I supposed to learn? You know what I'm saying? It's like when you come to terms with, this is my journey. This is the season of life I am in, which sucks. It hurts. It's painful. But like now you can like really start to work through it, you buy into it, which like when you fully buy into anything, like the doors, no matter how bad it is, like it actually becomes like something beautiful. But when you're fighting it, when you're resisting it, when you're avoiding it, like it's a pure hell, because like you're not healing what you want to, but then you're not doing the work to heal. So it's like you're left in like a corner without any way forward,
Yeah, man, there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying. I think it's super important to recognize that God isn't fragile. So God can tolerate us having our temper tantrums. You know, I remember just, you know, get the different stages of grief. It's like denial. And then it's like, for me, it was anger. It's all this anger, like, you, God, for letting this happen. Why did this happen to me? You know, I'd go through this, throw my temper tantrum. I don't want to eat my broccoli. God's telling me I got to eat my broccoli and I don't want to eat it. And I'm throwing this fit. But I recognized in that, like, God is okay with that. He understands the process. And so, like, I never lost my faith in God. I never turned my back on God. I was angry at God a lot. And I would have these, like, episodes where I was like Lieutenant Dan, if you've ever seen Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Where he's like at the end, like he's on the boat. He's like, is this all you got? You call this a storm? He's working out his issues with God. I felt like I was in that space for a little while. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
But you come out of that and then you just see so much of these divine moments that God bakes into it. And you see how he's guiding you along the whole time, albeit subtly, you know, like there's a divine intelligence in this process. And there's something so deeply sacred and personal about going through suffering that, you know, you could offer me anything in the world. And for those experiences, I wouldn't trade them. There's nothing. Those moments where it was me going through the refiner's fire are the things that I hold closest to my heart now.
Mm-hmm. Which I absolutely just love that. Like from the bottom of my heart, because it means you've done, like we were talking right before this, it means you've done the work to turn that pain into power, you know, like pain into learning, pain into wisdom, you know, pain into purpose, pain into knowledge. Whereas if you don't and you just stay in the victim mindset forever, then you never learn, you never grow, you never turn it into purpose, into power. And like, yeah, you're just self-sabotaging. You know what I mean? For who knows how long, which like, I want to end up like you. And like, that's like the road I'm really striving to go down, because like people be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like you got divorced or you got excommunicated, whatever. And I'm like, this is like the greatest blessing in my life, because it has put me back on track. And the depth that I feel like it's given me, obviously I'm not, like, I still have a ton to learn, but like the knowledge that it's given me, the wisdom that it's given me, I'm just like, I wouldn't, like, this pain is hell and it sucks, but it's worth it for what's on the other side, you know? So what has that other side look like for you? Like, cause you're in those broken moments, you know, you just shared all that. Like, how does it now traject upward?
So, you know, I've always been a scripture read guy. I've always read my scriptures every day. They're kind of like my go-to thing that I start the day off with, do a little meditation, a face ice bath. And then I always jump into the scriptures. And even when I was going through this episode of me being angry with God and feeling like a victim, I was still reading my scriptures and still praying to God and talking to him. And I was going through the book of Job, just ironically, just because that's where I was at, reading through the Old Testament in order of the books. And I was like, dude, in a small way, I could super relate to Job, right? Job had it worse, but I was like,
right.
I felt like everything was being taken away from me. But I remember having like this conversation with God, and I was like talking to him about, like, I kept thinking when I went through that process, there was so much stuff that changed and evolved for me, but particularly my relationship with God changed significant. Growing up, most of my life, the way I was conditioned by family and church and everything else was that the purpose of life was for me to follow all of God's commandments as closely as I could, you know, ask God to direct me in everything. And if I was worthy enough, that God would finally tell me what his will was for me. And then I would go do that. And that would be life. And that's what I was supposed to do. And when I was going through this, reading Job, reading a lot of other scriptures, I constantly was reminded in the verses that I was reading that God would say, what is it that you want to do according to your desires? Like, I would hear this all the time. It was reoccurring. And so I'm 40-ish, and, you know, I feel like my first half of life is coming to a close, and I've got this second half ahead of me. And so I would spend a lot of time talking to God about what should I do with this second half of life. And I kept getting back this same impression. What is it that you want to do with this second half of life? Stop asking me what I want you to do with it. I want to know what you want to do with your second half of life. And it reoriented me not only to my relationship with God, but my relationship with myself. And so instead of like asking God, what should I do? What should I do? I started thinking about what I wanted to do. What did I really want to get out of a second half of life? And I had this 3-hour prayer with God one night. I was out under the stars underneath. At this point, I'd moved into my parents' basement. I was living there, and I was out under the stars just talking to God. And I was like, what is it, the second half of life? If I could make it the best it could be, what would I want out of that? And I had 3 things. And I went through those 3 things with God. And every one of those ones, I was like, God, I just got this just outpouring of love from the divine. Like, son, good. Yes, I want that for you too. That's good. And then I got to this point where, like, do I ever get remarried again? Because I didn't want to get remarried. That was one of my big takeaways from going through divorce, is like, especially since I had kids already, you know, like, I was like, dude, I'm never going to put another person in that type of control over me where they have that power. I wasn't bitter, but I was just like, no shot I'm ever doing that again.
Right.
But I'm in this really spiritual experience moment talking to God, and I thought, and would I want to get into another serious relationship, a marriage? And I just went off these things. Like I said, God, if there was somebody like this, and if I could have a relationship like this, these are big ifs, God. But if those things were on the table, then I'd want to get married again too. But if they're not, I'm happy being single. Like, but it would have to look like this. And I felt this a sense of love, but it was just kind of like I didn't get like some sort of confirmation that was going to happen or not. But I went into, to answer your question, I went into this second half of life post divorce with a real strong desire to go out and make it the best that I could make it. And I realized I think that's more the point of life than trying to follow a bunch of rules really closely and be super obedient and kind of do what you're told. I think God wants us to go live amazing lives. I think he wants us to go level up. I think he wants us to screw up. He wants us to fuck up. He wants us to fall down. He wants us to make mistakes. He wants us to learn from them. That's the whole process. And I think about like with my own children, like I don't want my children to just follow all of my rules that I've given them for the rest of their lives. I want them to evolve and change. And I'm interested in what they're interested in. Like my oldest daughter's into theater. She's exceptionally good at it. I've never been interested in theater. And now theater is like one of my favorite things. I can't wait to go see her plays.
Yeah, it's awesome.
See her up on the stage, just vibrant and being like in her element. And it's so rewarding for me as a father to see that. And all my children are different. They all have different interests and things they're involved in. And I'm so interested in what they're involved in. And I feel like that's how God is with us. He's much more involved or much more interested in seeing what we want to create out of this life that he's given us, this opportunity to come down and have this mortal experience, than about us just towing some line so that we've looked the part or, you know, whatever we feel like we checked off the boxes.
Yeah, and it's like God, like a lot of times we're like, oh, God has a plan for you. It's just like, oh, like God, like God's will is gonna like if you follow his will, he has like a whole life for you. You know, it's just like, but it's like that kind of takes away like our plan and our will. It's just like, but yes, he does have a plan for us. Like he does, like we are meant to align our will with his, but it's just like he also like has given us agency where it's just like go to earth and like become everything you want to become. And here are some guidelines along the way to avoid evil, you know, because like there's absolutely evil in the world. And it's just like the Lord is going to like obviously warn us of that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time though, he's like, go become everything you want to become. But like, I feel like we get so caught up in like, God has a plan for me that like, we don't even go after our own plan or our own ideas or our own desires because we're so worried about God's plan. Like God's plan is that we return home to his presence like he is, right? And if you did what you do along the way and I do what I do along the way and we both end up there, that's God's plan, even though they're two separate journeys. You know what I'm saying?
That's exactly how I feel. I feel like every one of us is on a very personalized experience down there.
I love that you learned that through all this.
That's what set the trajectory for the second half of this life. That was kind of the foundation. It's like I was no longer going into this second, because, you know, my first half, and especially with my first marriage, I felt like I'd done everything according to God's will, at least according to as it had been given to me from church and family and whatever else, the influences in my life. I had done the things I was supposed to do, and it didn't work, right? And when I say it didn't work, that's a loose term because it worked perfectly to teach me the things that I needed to learn. But, you know, like
right.
My limited perspective, I was like, I did everything right and my marriage is falling apart and my family's being torn apart. And I was treating it like it was some sort of horrific punishment, divine punishment, or something that I had just complete like shame that I had failed at something. And that was this catalyst for this reconstruction of my relationship with God and what I thought God was saying to me in my relationship with myself. And what I believe now firmly is that everybody is on a different trajectory. Everybody has a different path. Everybody's going to go through hard times. It's going to be very personal, but that the primary purpose for all of us, men and women, the primary purpose for each one of us in this life is to become the very best that we can become. The most powerful, dynamic, badass version of ourselves. That's the priority. And everything else is kind of secondary to that. And so when I realized like, hey, my job is to go be the best version of myself. It's not to follow the rules. It's not to fit in. And I follow the rules, right? Like, but that's not the point. That's not the purpose. Like the point is to evolve and develop and grow and gain experiences and knowledge and context and wisdom. Like that's the purpose of life, and to become better, to learn from these things. So now I could look at these experiences and subsequent, I've gone through a lot of hard times since then. Everybody does. I could look at those things and say, like, this isn't happening to me. It's happening for me. All of these things are part of this process of developing, because you cannot grow. You cannot evolve. You cannot change if you don't have adversity. So you can see the divine footprint in a world like entropy, where everything you do is met with adversity. You go out and try and create a family, it's met with adversity. You go out and try and carve out a place for you in the world to provide, there's adversity. You go to the gym to get in shape, it's adversity that gets you there. Like everything is supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be hard. And when we can stop feeling sorry for ourselves when it is hard, instead start to lean into that and be like, dude, this is the way. This is the process. And instead of letting that pain turn into trauma, which is where you take the pain that is healthy, pain is healthy, instead of taking the pain and turning it into your identity, instead you take that pain and you use that as this catalyst for growth and rebirth. And I think we were talking about this off right before we started filming this, but that's the metaphor of Christ's life, is that he went through the most horrific things this world could throw at him, and he didn't let those things define him. Instead, they became the fuel for Christ's ascension into the resurrection and into, this divine being that he is, because he went through all of those things.
Absolutely. And he turned every ounce of pain into now his purpose, which is to succor us according to our sorrows and afflictions and our sins. It's like all his pain is now his purpose too. So I love that too. There's true wisdom in that. Where does it look like after you're outside praying under the stars for 3 hours, you feel this divine love of like, these are the three things I want, maybe marriage. What's like the next part of that story of how you end up where you're at now?
Well, that was the catalyst for me reorienting myself towards what life is. And so then I got in my lane, and I think this is intensely important. Like, if you can't learn to be happy alone, if you can't learn to be happy with yourself, you're never going to be happy in a relationship. Too many of us are looking for external things to satisfy the holes that are inside of us. Like, if I just get in the right marriage, if I just get the right job, if I just get the right whatever, the right recognition or whatever, then I'll be fine. And so we keep externalizing the process, and the external things are great. The signs of success, they're fantastic, but they're not the point. The point is the internal journey. It's what are you developing as a person? And so when I got through those first stages of the divorce and those months where I was just constantly depressed and started leaning into that, I got really, really intentional about my relationship with myself. I recognized that the most important relationship that I'll ever have in this life is the relationship with myself. And people get fired up when I say that sometimes on social media. No, the most important relationship you'll ever have is with God. And I'm like, I understand why they're saying that, but I don't think that's actually true. I think it starts first with us, because your idea of God is going to be a projection of what's going on inside of you. And you can sit in the same Sunday school class next to the same people in the same service. Everybody has a different idea of who God is. All of them have a different relationship with him. And you look at people like the Pharisees, they thought they understood God. But because they were so corrupt inside, they had created this corrupt God. They'd projected that. And so I started really just getting intentional about being healthy with myself. I started trying to remove shame from myself. Like, I didn't want that to be my identity. I wanted to just be happy being alone. And I got really, really happy just being alone. I had my kids half the time. I was just on my journey in my lane working. I was at peace. It was a process to get there, but instead of focusing on external things, or instead of caring what other people thought or said, I just really tried to focus on being healthy. And it was a symbiotic relationship with God. They both evolved together, but really getting happy and content and peaceful with who I was. And I didn't need a marriage. I didn't need to get into another relationship. And so many of my buddies that were going through divorces at the same time, there must have been something in the water, because a whole bunch of my buddies were like, we're all kind of going through divorces and connecting after years and not talking.
Yeah.
I go, you're going through this, me too. So many of them were kind of stuck in the past, wishing things were different, wishing they had done things different. Like, in that place I had been in, begrudging the process and just like letting it define them. And I wasn't that way. Like, after I got through this, I was like, dude, being single is awesome. I just me with me taking care of stuff. This is a really cool time in life, and finding trying to appreciate every moment that I was in, every season that I was in. And then I met Kylie, and totally surprised. Like, we went on a first date, and I had no idea who she was. Like, everybody knows Kylie in Utah, but I didn't know who she was because I've been married and not in the singles game or anything. But
Right.
everybody knew who she was, and I went out with her, and I thought, man, this girl's so cool, but I'm never getting married again. I'm never getting married.
That's
ever
hilarious.
again, but she's fun. I'll hang out with her. She's cool. And she went home and told her family she met the dude she was going to marry after
Really?
our first date. So we had two totally different takeaways from that first encounter. But she just kept getting cooler and cooler, man. And I just got to a point where I was like, I couldn't deny how amazing this woman was. And so we got married.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
That's incredible. I'm happy for you. Seriously, like it's so, like, I feel like people like you that have been through serious hell and back and have like turned it into now like a whole new life with so much wisdom and power and purpose. Like, those are the true heroes of life. You know what I'm saying? It's not like who the world builds up these heroes to be that, like, are just who they are because of their status. Like, I feel like the real heroes are the people that do that work to become a better person to bless their families and their communities, you know? What did it look like? So you said like I went all in on myself and my relationship with myself. What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was like just doing the things you know you need to do to be healthy. So like getting up early, taking control of my day, being intentional about the decision I make, reading my scriptures, doing meditation, really trying to process the entire divorce and the marriage and work through the trauma that was there. And then really just focusing on me being the best version of myself, just getting to work and progressing, because the happiest people in this life are the people that are progressing. There are anybody you want to be like, you look at them, you see their energy. The people that are leveling up in life, they're learning things, they're developing, they're getting better. Those are the people that are really fulfilled. And the people who feel stuck, like where they feel damned, the damnation is a literal thing we experience in this life. Those are the most unhappy, miserable people. So I just try to keep myself on a trajectory of just improving and getting better, and like focusing on that relationship with myself, and really getting rid of shame. There's a story that I have, for example, like that this was a big teaching moment for me. So, you know, I was kind of coming out of this really dark place, but still just banged up from the whole process. And I was taking my kids to school one morning, and my oldest son, he said something on the way to the school that just set me off. And I unloaded on him a whole bunch of stuff. I just like snapped, and he didn't deserve it. He wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just me not being healthy with myself and just dumping all of these bricks that I was carrying in my backpack onto him. And when we got to the school and he got out and walked into the building, I could just see his shoulders slumped. I could just see I'd handed him a whole bunch of stuff he didn't deserve. And of course, then the shame starts saying, "Oh, you're a piece of shit. You're the worst dad ever. Look what you just did. You just sent your son into school today, just feeling crappy about himself." Like I started going, spiraling down like I would always do. Cause I think a lot of times for us that are religious, we're taught that shame is a good thing. Like if we just flog ourselves proverbially enough, if we just beat ourselves up enough, that might bring us into some form of redemption. If we suffer enough, like impose that on ourselves, that that's the way. And it's not, it's the opposite. Shame does the opposite of improvement. It keeps you stuck where you're at. I wasn't cognitive of that at this moment, but like I was just doing the normal spiral for being a shitty dad in that moment. And God's voice, I heard again, said, "Son, just skip this part." And I was so audible in my head that I had to pull over to the side of the road. I was driving to work, and I had to pull over to the side of the road. And what God was telling me to do was just skip the shame part. You don't need to do this part where you beat yourself up. Instead, just get to the punchline where you get better. Just get to the learning. And I had to physically force myself to do that. I was like, okay, I'm going to take you at your word, God. I'm trying to listen. You told me to skip the shame part, which seems so contradictory to my nature, my instincts. But okay, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to have a good day. I'm not going to let this like affect the rest of my day. I'm going to do what I need to do. And then I went back to school, picked up my son, had a really heart-to-heart conversation with him. I said, "Son, I'm a kid just like you. I'm learning. I'm going through hard things. You didn't deserve what happened today. I'm so sorry. I will never do that ever again. I love you so much, and you need to know how important you are to me." And then I took him out to get his favorite treat and do his favorite thing. And we had this really cool bonding experience, me and my son. And I learned that I could just skip the shame. I never had to like deal with shame. I could just get to the learning part. And I've never talked to my son like that since. But I think if I'd been shaming myself, like beating myself up, I probably would still be snapping at my son. I would probably still be doing the same behavior that was causing the shame. I'd be reinforcing that. But I was able to skip that and just get to the part about learning. And I've tried to apply that now in my life anytime I screw up, because we all make mistakes and do stupid things. Instead of letting that shame come in, recognize there's pain there. There should be pain there. There should be some regret there. I shouldn't have done that. But I'm just going to try and get to the learning part where I get better, instead of like creating this identity that I'm a bad person.
Bro, I love that. And it's like Satan wants us to wallow in the shame because, like you said, we never progress. Like our focus now is the shame instead of like, "Son, what do you need to do to fix this?" It's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Seriously, I love that. I appreciate your vulnerability with that. Like so much of your story, like pivotal moments of your story in every part has been God's voice and him speaking to you. How does one learn to recognize God's voice so that they have that same guidance that you've had throughout everything?
There's probably a lot of different things that I won't even be able to articulate. But for me, it's just how I try to start every day, the trajectory that I try to put my day on. And I try to be intentional every morning about connecting with God. And I think it's kind of like God, the voice of God is probably like one of those old radios, where you can tune in and tune out. God's always speaking, but there's so much noise. We're cluttered with so many things, responsibilities, doom scrolling, distractions, whatever else, that we're not tuned into that frequency. And I don't think getting tuned into that frequency has anything to do with worthiness. It's one of the things I've had a problem with our upbringing in the church is like people say, I walked into the bar and the spirit left or whatever, and I'm like, dude, that is the worst nonsense I've ever heard in my life now. At the time when I was coming up, I bought into it. But I'm like, you don't think God is with the guys that are in the bar? You don't think he cares about them? Wasn't Jesus going to the sinners? Wasn't that where he was spending his time, the lost sheep? Tuning in has nothing to do with worthiness. And I always thought it did. I thought the only way I could hear God is if I was living this super moral life. And then if I wasn't hearing God, it must be something wrong with me, right? Like I must not be following all the rules perfectly or whatever. I know that's not the case, because God has come to me in my worst moments and talked to me. God doesn't deal in shame. God has no use for shame. And so like really trying to connect with God, regardless of what my personal life has looked like with the mistakes I made the day before or whatever else, like knowing that I can talk to God and he's going to talk to me back. And I do that through meditation. I do that through prayer. I do that through reading my scriptures. And I do that by just trying to think about God throughout the day. And I like a lot of times I'll just have conversations with God. And he's not necessarily talking back, but I'm just like in my car driving somewhere and be like, man, dude, that was so cool yesterday. God, thanks for that. That was an awesome experience. What do I need to learn? I just try to have this running dialogue or conversation with God. I try to make sure I'm taking time every day to be really grateful for the things that I have. And I feel like those are ways that I'm able to tune in that frequency so that God's voice is more audible in my life. Because I know he's always talking. I know there's always impressions that I can feel. There's always epiphanies I can get. And sometimes there's outright words that come into my head. And I feel like it's trying to get my life dialed into that frequency.
Yeah, it's so good. And like from what I'm hearing too, it's like it has nothing to do with where you are, like whether you're in a bar or not, but it's the condition of your heart.
Bingo.
Like, is your heart set on God? Because he's everywhere. You know, and one of my favorite scriptures is in the Bible when a woman like anoints Jesus with an oil. And then like the Pharisees come to him and they're like, do you know who's anointing you with an oil? Like if you really knew, you would never let her do that. Mm-hmm. So like, we don't know what that means of what she was doing. But for some reason, by society, she was viewed as less than, dirty, unworthy, right? Like, oh, you're in a bar, you're not worthy now type energy. And Christ is just like, doesn't even pay him attention. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, that's because it's her heart. It's not her past. It's not where she is. It's where is she in this moment? And is she willing to seek the will of God and his heart and like align her heart with his? I agree with that. Like I have a really hard time with that energy too, you know, because I'm just like, when you read like Moses killed an Egyptian, you know what I'm saying? He hid the body and then he goes and lives in the desert. And that's where God calls him to be the prophet and is like, go free your men. You know, it was like after he had just committed this crime. And like Satan again wants us to wallow in shame because then we never get out. So I just absolutely like admire and love your story because of what you've learned and like the way you've gone about it and where you're at now. You know, I've loved this conversation.
Yeah, me too, man. I think these are really, really important conversations to have, to share our journeys with the divine, what we're going through in life, because it's relatable. We're all kind of going through the same stuff.
Right.
You know, and it is personal, but it's also universal.
Absolutely.
But that's one thing that, like, speaking of, the evolution of my relationship with God, that was one of the big pieces of it, was that I no longer believe in worthiness at all. I don't think worthiness has anything to do with God's relationship with us. He meets us right where we're at, and he goes after the lost sheep and the prodigal sons. His grace and his love, you don't have to be worthy of that. That's constant. That's always there. He always loves us, just like with my kids, man. My kids screw up. One of them hits the other one in the head with a toy. I'm not like, you're a bad kid. You're a terrible kid. Like, and until you recognize how bad of a kid you are, you're out of my good graces, sort of thing, like how I was raised. I'm like, this is just a kid. There's consequences. Like, consequences are good. Like, you need to learn, and there needs to be consequences for bad actions, especially as a parent. That's one of your jobs, is to provide structure, and give your kids like learning opportunities. And a lot of that looks like consequences. But I no longer ever punish my kids with any even sense of worthiness involved in it. Like, when there's consequences, I sit down, explain to them why there's consequences, but I also make sure they understand how much I love them and how amazing they are and how incredible I think they are and how I'm always going to be on their team and I'm always going to love them, whatever decisions that they make. There just has to be a consequence here, because you know the rule, you know what you broke, here's the consequence, and learn from it, but there's never any worthiness with it anymore. Ever.
Yeah. I absolutely just cherish that. Seriously, like that you just labeled that for me, because since my divorce, I've become my worst self, turned to everything of the body, of the flesh, and of the world. And God has met me like every step along the way, because again, it's not worthiness, but it's like, what direction are you trying to head and go, even though like maybe you're getting pulled in another one too, which is the adversary, Hugh
Nibley said something about what does a good man versus a bad man look like? And this was really interesting to me. He said a good man, it doesn't matter where he's at on the path, it matters which direction he's faced. And a bad man, it doesn't matter where he's at on the path, it matters what direction he's faced. So you can be at the top, the most righteous guy at church or whatever. But if your heart's not in the right direction, that's the definition of being a bad guy. And the definition of a good guy has nothing to do with where your starting point is at.
Yeah.
It just has everything to do with what your desires are, what you're trying to work towards.
That's great stuff. Seriously, I got to remember that. So like when you go through hell, when you're broken, like you go through a serious identity crisis and you're like, I don't even know what direction is. Speaking of direction, right? How does one go about finding his direction? Like how does he go about like rebuilding his identity?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is you have to, if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. Alice in Wonderland moment where she's like, which road should we take? And the cat's like, well, where are you going? And she's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, then any path is going to do. It doesn't matter. If you don't know where you're going, then nothing, you can take any path. So I think fundamentally as a man, if you want to start getting your house in order, you want to start making sense of your life, you have to define what your purpose is as a man. That's not something you just do in an afternoon. It's an evolving process of like, what is my purpose on this earth? Why am I here? What am I trying to accomplish? And I always coach my guys on this. Like, imagine what the best version of you is in 5 years. What does that guy look like physically, in a relationship, intellectually, financially? Like, imagine the best version of yourself. And if you have a hard time imagining that, find somebody that you look at and you want to be more like, whoever that is. It could be somebody on social media. It could be, in your family or friends or a mentor or something like that. And then put together a strategy. So first pick, what is it that you want to be? Like, define that, visualize it, see it, sit with it, meditate on it every morning. Like, what does that best version of me look like? How does he feel? How does he act? What kind of energy does he have? What does he have in his life? And then you start to put together a strategy on how to get there. And you're not going to do it overnight. Like, you're going to pick like, okay, well, that means I need to get up a little bit earlier every morning. So instead of waking up at 7:30 and racing out the door to get to work, I'm going to start getting up at 6:30. So it gives me an hour to start moving the needle in some of these areas. I'm going to start reading. I'm going to start listening to good podcasts instead of scrolling. I'm going to start making intentional decisions on a strategy that's going to get me closer to this point that I want to get to. And you just start making small steps. And you mess up. You don't get it right every time, but you just keep making these small steps. Keep committing yourself to the process. That's one of the things I do every morning in my meditation is I recommit myself to my purpose every day. Like, what is it that I want Adam to look like in 5 years? And then I try to really dial that in the morning and then set that for the trajectory for the rest of the day. But it starts there. And then you need a good tribe of brothers around you. You got to have good friends. Like, accountability is crucial in this, and a community is. It's really hard to do this as a lone wolf. So you need buddies you can hang out with, guys you can unload your shit with, vent to, and vice versa. Iron sharpens iron. And so you get in a good community of guys. You are who you surround yourself with. And if you don't have proximity to good friends, then surround yourself with people online, people you want to be more like, people you think are further down the path, and you start listening to them. The difference between where somebody is and where you're at, the difference is how they spend their currency. Everybody has the same currency. You have 24 hours in a day. That's the real currency in life, is your time. You've got 24 hours. The difference between you here and them there, they're spending their time differently. That's the difference. Now, everybody has a different starting point, and everybody has different cards in their hands that they get dealt at the beginning of this life. That's not really the point. The point is, how do you start spending your time? And if you're just wasting it away, if you're just, putting junk food into your head every day, watching TV, doom scrolling, whatever, you're going to get a junk output. This is all biological technology we're working in. This is a freaking hard drive, and we're working in this interface, this simulation that's ultimately just a reflection of what's going on inside of us. Everything we see out here is a reflection of this, everything. And so when you start to say, okay, well, I'm going to have a strategy now and I'm going to start spending my time a little bit differently, the progress is almost imperceptible at first. You don't really notice much. And so it can be really hard to stay on the trajectory because you're like, well, I've been doing this for 2 weeks and don't really feel that different. But you do that for a month, you do that for 6 months, you do that for a couple of years, suddenly your life is in a completely different place than it was when you started.
Right.
But you have to own it. No one's coming to save you. There's not going to be a magic wand or a magic pill you can take to get your life together. You have to do the heavy lifting of putting in that work to start making something different. And if you do that, and if you stick with it, it'll happen. It's like gravity. It just happens. It just starts to work.
It's great advice. Seriously. I love that. And I love that you're clear on your purpose and where you're going and like how you're going to get there. And you got to recommit to it every day. Mm-hmm. Because you wake up brain fog, you're going to go be your worst self. Everything like you do too, like is about like men too, finding their roles and being men. In simple words, like how do you define being a man?
My definition of what a man is somebody who can impose his will on the world around him. That's what a man is you are strong enough to impose your will. Bad men do it for selfish reasons. What can they get? What's going to feed their ego? They're usually focused on external things. So get the money, get jacked, get the women, that's kind of like the immature version or the bad version of what masculinity is. True healthy masculinity is when you're imposing you're imposing your will on the world around you to make it a better place for others, including yourself. So me being able to go out and provide for my family, that's me imposing my will in the world. I go out my front door, I work hard. My wife doesn't have to work. She can stay home and raise the kids, and she can buy whatever she needs to buy. I'm imposing my will on the world around me. My relationship with my wife, I do the same thing. I need to impose my will on that relationship. That sounds super tyrannical and it'll trigger people like, oh my gosh, he's dominating his wife. I don't dominate her at all.
Right.
Like I try to understand her. What are her buttons? What makes her tick? What dynamic do we need in our relationship? And then I try to facilitate that. I try to create that. So I try to understand her better. So I know which buttons to push, which ones not to, where to draw a line, where not to try and manage that relationship. Yeah, I saw there's a really cool experience I had in Mexico when Kylie and I were first married, and we were in this restaurant at this high-end resort. Her and I are at a table. We've been married for a couple months, and this bougie chick walks in. She's probably like in her 50s, but just a beautiful woman. She's got like her Louis Vuitton bag on. She's got her dress. She immediately, her energy alone kind of captures the attention. So I'm like watching her, and I see her husband come in with her, and I'm watching both of them because he doesn't look that way at all. Not the same energy at all. Much more like kind of humbled a little bit, like didn't have the same flash when he came in. They went and sat down they were seated at the table next to us. So I'm like ear hustling. There's just such an interesting couple. Here's this chick that's just powerful force, and her husband that she's with that isn't giving off the same energy. But I'm listening to him converse. I'm ear hustle in their conversation. And every time she spoke with him, she spoke to him with the utmost respect. And I was like, here's a woman that would chew up most of the guys in this room if she was in a relationship with him. She'd totally dominate him and destroy him. But with this guy, her husband, she's not submissive. She's respectful. She trusts him. She knows that he's competent and capable. And she doesn't have to have her guard up or walls up or be abrasive. Instead, she just shows deference to this man. And I realized, I'm sure he was a business guy. I didn't end up talking to him, but I'm sure he's a business guy because the way he communicated and talked. But you could just tell he understood her so well. And he understood how to manage the relationship, that they had this really beautiful dynamic relationship, in my opinion, because of the way that he was managing the relationship. He wasn't controlling her. He wasn't dominating her. He wasn't telling her what to do. She wouldn't have put up with that. He was just intensely competent and able to impose his will in that relationship. To me, that's what the definition of a man is when you become powerful enough that you can impose your will on the world around you. And you do it for good reasons. You do it to make it better for your children, to make it better for your wife, to make it better for your friends, your family, those who are on your watch. You go into that world of entropy and you carve out something that makes it a little bit better for everybody else.
Yeah, that's incredible. Because I've been curious what you would say that as, because that's a lot of your movement. So like, this is my first time I'm hearing it, and I love a lot of it. And like, I want to process a lot of it, like really sit on it. One thing though, that I did think though was, like the whole thing of like, I got to impose my will on my wife. It's like you say, it's not like you're going to dominate her or be a tyrant, but it's about like, we as men are leaders. And like, we set the tone. And like, if you like, that's really what you're doing, is like, you're setting the tone of the relationship. And it's just like, if you don't set the tone, then one, who does? Or two, like, what is the tone? There is none, which isn't going to be a healthy relationship.
Every woman you talk to, they're wired for the same thing. Women have evolved to seek for safety. They don't feel safe with a guy who's weak.
Right.
They don't feel safe with a guy who can't impose his will. And most women want to be led in a relationship. Again, not abused, not dominated. That's not what we're talking. They want a man they can shut their brain off with. Where like, I don't have to worry about things because my man's got it handled.
And they can show any emotion and they're safe with.
Exactly. And that's what competency looks like. Again, this is not dominating. I want to make sure I'm clear when I'm describing imposing your will in a relationship is not you telling her what to do. I never do that with Kylie, but I try to be competent enough in my understanding of her and understanding what's good for our relationship to create that energy in our relationship. And that's my responsibility as the man. I don't expect Kylie to do that. And I don't think it would be healthy for her or me if she was the one that was setting the tone for the energy in our relationship.
Right.
She doesn't want that. She wants to be with a man that can lead. And that requires me to step up my game and get better.
Exactly. And when you do step up and do that, it allows her to step into her feminine role, which is a nurturing, loving home builder that men, like young boys and young girls, need. But when she's out there having to set the tone and lead, like she can't even fall into her own role.
Oh, it's so spot on. And for me as a man, that's what I need.
Right.
So it's super
exactly.
symbiotic,
You need
right?
to come home to that.
I don't need to come home to a masculine woman that's been out kicking ass in the world all day.
Right.
I need to come home to a woman that's at peace and a woman that feels safe and she's at peace, because that gives me her peace. The peace that I'm able to provide by going out my front door going out and sacrificing, working hard. It's a cutthroat world we live in, especially in business. If I can come back and my wife is at peace and she greets me with a hug and she, scratches my back and
that softness.
oh my gosh, I can run through walls all day long.
Exactly.
Like, it gives me back that peace. So it's this really beautiful yin and yang that
Right.
when you're both in your proper energy and you're both in your proper roles, dude, I can't imagine anything better than this.
Yeah.
And so like where I've been and the contrast that I have between two different marriages is night and day. But a lot of the reason why my second marriage is why it's so much better than my first marriage, there's a lot of reasons, but one of them is that I just learned so much from my first one and I executed better in the second one. I knew how to be more competent. If I had met Kylie first, at the very least, I would take her for granted. At the very least. Probably worse, I would be melting down our relationship in some way. That's why, again, I go back and look back on those things the most horrific time in my life. And it's just the most intense amount of gratitude that I have for those experiences now.
Absolutely.
It's made all the difference.
Absolutely. I love that. I want to thank you for being here though, Adam. Seriously. I love talking to you. I love what's in your brain and your heart, the work that you've done. I just genuinely appreciate you taking your time to be here. Like, I know you're doing another podcast this morning. Head right over here for this one. Seriously. And I appreciate you like giving that time and energy, which is what I want to end up being and doing, like you're just so bought into my role, no matter what time it takes, no matter what dedication it takes, like I'm doing it and I'm rolling with it.
First off, I just want to thank you for having me on the show, Matt. I love the work that you're doing. I love your authenticity and you're on the path, man. The way that you're talking, communicating, you're on that. You're headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
For whatever that's worth coming from me.
Thank you.
Doughboy Nation. I have a whole coaching community that we've just launched like 5 weeks ago officially. I think we're already up to 150 members. It's growing like every day. We're putting on 6 to 10 new members. Just the need for so many of us guys out there to be in tribes is really prevalent to me. Like, we got to start getting together. We got to start having conversations like this with each other, like digging into the real like meat and potatoes of what life is about, why we're here. And we do that most effectively in our tribes with our brothers. So anybody who's interested in joining, go check out this DGHBOY.com. You can see what we have to offer there. Feel free to hit me up on social media, Adam Allred Official, on any of the platforms. I always reply. Sometimes it takes me a while to get back, just bandwidth and stuff, but I'll always reply if people hit me up. I think it's important to keep those types of conversations alive.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, thank you again. Just have absolutely loved this conversation and look forward to more.
Me too.
Thank you.
Brother.
Thank you.
Thanks.